Chapter 10. General Principles of Working a Ship. Action of the water upon the rudder. Headway, sternway. Action of the wind upon the sails. Head sails, after sails. Center of gravity or rotation. Turning a ship to or from the wind. A ship is acted upon principally by the rudder and sails. When the rudder is fore and aft, that is, on a line with the keel, the water runs by it, and it has no effect upon the ship's direction. When it is changed from a right line to one side or the other, the water strikes against it, and forces the stern in an opposite direction. For instance, if the helm is put to the starboard, the rudder is put off the line of the keel, to port. This sends the stern off to the starboard, and of course, the ship turning on her center of gravity, her head goes in an opposite direction, to port. If the helm is put to port, the reverse will follow, and the ship's head will turn off her course to starboard. Therefore, the helm is always put in the opposite direction from that in which the ship's head is to be moved. Moving the rudder from a right line has the effect of deadening the ship's way more or less, according as it is put at a greater or less angle with the keel. A ship should therefore be so balanced by her sails that a slight change of her helm may answer the purpose. If a vessel is going astern, and the rudder is turned off from the line of the keel, the water, striking against the back of the rudder, pushes the stern off in the same direction in which the rudder is turned. For instance, if sternway is on her, and the helm is put to the starboard, the rudder turns to port, the water forces the stern in the same direction, and the ship's head goes off to the starboard. Therefore, when sternway is on a vessel, put the helm in the same direction in which the head is to be turned. A current or tide running astern, that is, when the ship's head is towards it, will have the same effect on the rudder as if the ship were going ahead, and when it runs forward, it will be the same as though the ship were going astern. It will now be well to show how the sails act upon a ship, with reference to her center of rotation. Suppose a vessel to be rigged with 3 sails, one in the forward part, one at the center, and the third at the after part, and her left or larboard side to be presented to the wind, which we will suppose to be abeam or at right angles with the keel. If the head sail only were set, the effect would be that the wind would send the vessel a little ahead and off to the starboard on her center of rotation, so as to bring her stern slowly round to the wind. If the after sail only were set, the vessel would shoot ahead a little, her stern would go off to the starboard, and her head come up into the wind. If only the center sail were set, the effect would be the same as if all 3 of the sails were set, and she would go ahead in a straight line. So far, we have supposed the sails to be set full, that is, with their tacks forward and their sheets aft. If they were all set aback, the vessel would go astern nearly, if the rudder were kept steady, in a straight line. If the head sail only is set and aback, she will go astern and round upon her axis, with her head from the wind, much quicker than if full. So, if the after sail alone were set and aback, she would go astern, and her head would come suddenly into the wind. These principles of the wind acting upon the sails and the water upon the rudder are the foundation of the whole science of working a ship. In large vessels the sails are numerous, but they may all be reduced to 3 classes, viz. Head sails, or those which are forward of the center of gravity or rotation, having a tendency to send the ship's head off from the wind. After sails, or those abaft the center of rotation, and which send the stern off and the head toward the wind. And lastly, center sails, which act equally on each side the center of rotation, and do not turn the ship off her course one way or the other. These classes of sails, if set aback, tend to stop the headway, and send the ship astern, and also to turn her off her course in the same direction as when set full, but with more rapidity. The further a sail is from the center of rotation, the greater is its tendency to send the ship off from the line of her keel. Accordingly, a jib is the strongest head sail, and a spanker the strongest aftersail. The center of rotation is not necessarily at the center of the ship. On the contrary, as vessels are now built, it may not be much abaft that part of the deck to which the main tack is boarded. For the main breadth, or dead flat, being there, the greatest cavity will also be there, and of course the principal weight of the cargo should center there, as being the strongest part. Therefore, the center of rotation will greatly depend upon proper stowage. If the ship is much by the stern, the center of rotation will be carried aft, and if by the head, it will be carried forward. The cause of this is that when loaded down by the stern, her after sails have but little effect to move her stern against the water, and a very slight action upon the forward sails will send her head off to leeward, as she is there light and high in the air. Accordingly, to keep her in a straight line, the press of sail is required to be further aft, or, in other words, the center of rotation is further aft. If a ship is loaded down by the head, the opposite results follow, and more head and less aftersail is necessary. A ship should be so stowed and have her sails so trimmed that she may be balanced as much as possible, and not be obliged to carry her helm much off the line of her keel, which tends to deaden her way. If a ship is stowed in her best sailing trim, and it is found, when on a wind, that her head tends to windward, obliging her to carry a strong weather helm, it may be remedied by taking in some aftersail, or adding headsail. So, if she carries a lee helm, that is, if her head tends to fly off from the wind, it is remedied by taking in head or adding aftersail. Sometimes a ship is made to carry a weather helm by having too much headsail set aloft, for if she lies much over on a wind, the square sails forward have a tendency to press her downwards and raise her proportionally abaft, so that she meets great resistance from the water to leeward under her bows, while her stern, being light, is easily carried off, which of course requires her to carry a weather helm. The general rules, then, for turning a ship are these: to bring her head to the wind, put the helm to leeward, and bring the wind to act as much as possible on the aftersails, and as little as possible on the headsails. This may be done without taking in any sail, by letting go the head sheets, so that those sails may lose their wind, and by pointing the head yards to the wind, so as to keep the head sails shaking. At the same time, keep the after sails full, and flatten in the spanker sheet, or, if this is not sufficient, the after sails may be braced aback, which will send the stern off and the head to windward. But as this makes back sails of them, and tends to send the vessel astern, there should be either head or center sails enough filled to counteract this and keep headway upon her. On the other hand, to turn the head off from the windward, put the helm to windward, shiver the after sails, and flatten in the head sheets. Brace the head yards aback if necessary, being careful not to let her lose headway if it can be avoided. The vessel may be assisted very much in going off or coming to by setting or taking in the jib and spanker, which, if the latter is fitted with brails, are easily handled.